Claire never imagined that her life would settle into something so quietly predictable. At 38, she had stability, a spacious suburban home, a dependable husband, and no major conflicts to speak of. Mark, her husband, was everything people envied: successful, polished, kind, and too busy for emotional depth. He traveled constantly for work, calling in like clockwork with distant affection and reminders to take care of herself. And Claire did. She filled her days with tidy routines, yoga in the mornings, and wine at night. She smiled for neighbors, hosted garden brunches, and pretended she wasn't bored out of her mind. Then Ethan moved back in. Mark's son from his first marriage, Ethan had just finished his third year at college. He was supposed to stay for the summer, just until his internship started in September. Claire had met him years ago, quiet, awkward, barely 17 when she married Mark. But now, he was a man. Broad-shouldered, confident, taller than his father, with that maddening kind of presence that turned heads. The first time he walked into the kitchen shirtless, Claire dropped a glass. She brushed it off as clumsy, but her nerves betrayed her. His smirk didn't help. At first, it was harmless. They crossed paths over coffee, talked late at night when Mark was away. Claire found herself laughing more, dressing better, paying attention to the way Ethan looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. She noticed details: how his voice deepened when he spoke softly, how his compliments felt personal, unlike Mark's distant praise. Ethan said she didn't look a day over 30. He stared a little too long. And Claire, instead of shutting it down, let it linger. She tried to shake it off. This was just boredom playing tricks. A stepmother entertaining impossible thoughts was nothing new. Reddit was full of those scandalous confessions. But this was real. One night, walking past Ethan's room, she heard his voice through the door. He was on the phone, speaking in a low, amused tone. "She's so different from other women," he said. "She doesn't even realize how sexy she is." Claire stopped mid-step. Her heart pounded. He couldn't be talking about her, could he? She tiptoed back to her room, locking the door behind her. Her hands shook. She told herself it meant nothing. Young men say foolish things. She was projecting. She had to be. But the next morning, Ethan greeted her with that same smirk. "You look good in that color," he said, eyes trailing just a little too low. Claire faked a smile, reached for her coffee, and avoided eye contact. But something had shifted. There was tension now, electric and dangerous. That night, Mark called from his hotel room, too tired to talk. Claire hung up quickly, claiming a headache. In truth, her thoughts were spinning. Ethan was just a few doors down, and she couldn't stop wondering what it would feel like if she stopped pretending. The line hadn't been crossed, not yet. But it was there, right in front of her. And she wasn't stepping back. Ethan lingered in the doorways now, never quite leaving a room without giving Claire a look that said more than words ever could. She should have been stern, should have drawn sharp boundaries, but every time she opened her mouth to shut it down, something softer came out. He made her feel seen in a way Mark hadn't in years. One quiet afternoon, with Mark working across the country, Claire found herself seated at the kitchen island as Ethan cooked omelets with casual confidence. He placed a plate in front of her with a wink, declaring it made with extra care. She blushed, shook her head as if amused, but inside something warm unfurled. They ate slowly. His knee brushed hers under the table. She didn't move. Later that evening, Claire stretched on the yoga mat in the living room, desperate to clear her head. She bent into a pose and felt self-conscious when she noticed Ethan standing behind her. "You're flexible," he said, voice husky. Heat flooded her cheeks. Instead of telling him to leave, she laughed awkwardly and pretended his attention was harmless. He sat cross-legged in front of her, eyes fixed, asking questions not about her chores, but her. What were her dreams? Did she ever feel lonely in this big house? No one ever asked Claire that. Without meaning to, she admitted she sometimes felt like expensive furniture, polished, admired, unused. His jaw tightened. "You deserve someone who actually touches you," he murmured, fingers grazing her ankle. Every instinct screamed to stand up and walk away, but she remained frozen, letting the thrill race up her spine. That night it rained hard. Thunder rattled the windows, and the power flickered, plunging the house into darkness. Claire fumbled for matches when Ethan appeared with candles, his presence steady and calm. He helped her light them, the soft glow painting his face in golden shadows. She wrapped herself in a blanket. Ethan draped one of his hoodies over her shoulders without asking. Their eyes met over the flickering light. Claire whispered, "This is dangerous." Ethan leaned closer. "Only if you run," he breathed. His hand brushed her cheek, tracing lightly down to her lips. She didn't move, heart hammering so loud she could barely think. The ringtone shattered the moment, Mark calling. She stepped aside, answering with a shaky voice. Mark chatted absently about meetings and hotel rooms. Claire lied that everything at home was fine while Ethan watched her intently from across the room. She hung up quickly, pulse racing. She should have sent Ethan to bed. Instead, she walked back toward him. He gently pulled her down beside him on the couch. Rain lashed the windows. Candlelight trembled between them. Ethan looked her over slowly, possessively. "I think about you constantly," he confessed. Claire swallowed hard, lips parted, unable to deny the flood of emotions. She whispered, "I'm your stepmother." Ethan didn't blink. "I don't care." His thumb brushed her lower lip. She closed her eyes as tension wrapped around them like a rope. She didn't kiss him back, not yet. But she didn't pull away either. Not once. Claire never imagined it could never happen again, settle into something so she crossed paths with Ethan. Her resolve crumbled a little more. She had stability, she woke before suburban home, scrubbing the kitchen counters as if she could erase what almost happened. Ethan found her husband still in her robe, hair messy, trying to look composed, kind. He didn't say a word, too busy for emotional depth. Simply took the sponge from her hand. He traveled constantly for work, calling in like clockwork with distant affection and reminders to take care of herself, slow and deliberate. Claire did. "You don't have to pretend around tidy routines, and yoga in the morning, how much she wanted to believe him. She planned to spend the afternoon at a friend's brunches, but as she pretended she wasn't bored out of her mind, appeared in the doorway of her bedroom. Then Ethan moved back in. His eyes darkened. Mark's son from his first marriage. Running away from me won't work. Ethan had just finished his third year at college. Claire intended to push past him. He was supposed to stay for the summer. Instead, she hesitated just until his internship started in September. Ethan stepped forward. Claire had met him years ago, breath warm against her ear. Awkward. Tell me you don't want when she married Mark, he challenged. But now, her lips he was parted a man with a protest broad-shouldered, that never came. Confident, she backed into the room, father, the door with that clicking shut behind him that turned her heart pounded with panic. The first time he walked into the kitchen, Ethan cradled her cheek, Claire dropped searching her eyes, she brushed it off as clumsy. But her nerves betrayed her. Herself. His smirk the kiss was fierce this time. At first, like something was starved and reckless had finally been unleashed. Over coffee. Claire talked late at night when Mark was away, pulling him closer instead of pushing him away. Laughing more, her robe slid open, paying attention to the way her name looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. She gasped his in return. She noticed details, shocked at her own how his voice deepened when he spoke softly, carelessly. How his compliments felt Claire telling herself she'd stop after one more breath. One more Ethan kiss, said she didn't look taste. A day over 30. But she didn't. He stared a little Ethan too laid long. Her back on the sheets and Claire, she shared with instead Mark of shutting it down, breathlessly, let it linger. That he had wanted she her tried since he was old enough to understand this desire. Was just boredom she playing answered tricks. With actions she would later claim entertaining impossible in herself was nothing new. Reddit was full of those scandalous confessions. Silence wrapped around them like a second skin. One night, Claire stared at the Ethan's room. She heard his voice behind the fading afterglow. He was on the phone, Ethan tracing in lazy circles on her stomach. Utterly so unashamed from other women, she sat up abruptly. She doesn't even realize how sexy she is. This can't happen again, mid-step, she whispered. Her heart pounded. He rose behind her. He couldn't be talking about her spine. Could he? You don't mean that. She tiptoed back to her room, Claire trembled, locking the door behind her. She pulled her robe close, her hands shook, stepping away from the bed as if it meant nothing. Could rewrite what had happened. Young men say foolish things. Ethan watched her calmly. She was projecting. Not she bothering to hide his nakedness. But the next morning, I'll keep Ethan your secret. Her with that same smirk, voice low. You look good but in that don't color, expect me to pretend I don't own a just piece a little too low. Claire flinched a smile, horrified at how right it felt, and avoided eye contact. She tossed his clothes at him, but something demanding had shifted before she lost her sanity completely. Electric and dangerous. He obeyed slowly. That night, toward the door, Mark called from his hotel room to whisper, "Too tired to talk of you." Claire hung up quickly, vanished, claiming a headache hard. In rushing to strip the sheets, her thoughts were spinning. Febrile with panic. Ethan was just a few doors down, twice, and she couldn't stop wondering what it would feel like if no amount of pretending could rinse away the line hadn't been crossed. Not yet. When Mark called that evening, it was there, cheerful and unsuspecting, And
she answered
wasn't
with a bright voice she crafted from sheer
lingered
guilt.
in the doorways now.
Everything's
never
perfect
quite
here,
leaving a
she
room
lied,
without
all the
giving
while
Claire
staring
a
at her
look that said
reflection,
more than
hair
words ever
damp,
could.
lips still
She should have
swollen
been
from
stern,
Ethan's kiss,
should
and
have drawn
wondering
sharp
when exactly
boundaries.
she had become
But every
this woman.
time she opened her
Claire
mouth to
almost
shut it down,
believed she could
something
maintain
softer
control
came out.
as long as she kept
He
her
made
distance,
her feel seen
but
in a
Ethan
way
was
Mark
relentless
hadn't
in his
years.
quiet pursuit.
One quiet
He began
afternoon,
leaving
with
small
Mark
gestures
working
she
across
couldn't
the country,
ignore.
a
Claire
cup of her
found herself
favorite tea
waiting on the counter
as
her
Ethan
phone
cooked
charged
omelets
and
with
placed
casual
neatly next to a
confidence.
handwritten
He
note
placed
that
a
read,
plate in front
"Thinking
of her
you."
with a wink.
She tried
declaring
locking her
it
bedroom
made
door
with
at
extra
night,
care.
only to
She
wake with
blushed,
the distinct
shook her head
sensation
as if
that
amused,
someone had lingered
but
just
inside
beyond
something
warm
Every
unfurled.
sound in the
They
hallway
ate
made
slowly.
her pulse jump.
His knee brushed
Meanwhile,
hers under
Mark
the table.
announced a
She
spontaneous
didn't
family
move.
vacation.
Later that
insisting
evening,
it would help
Claire
them
stretched
reconnect.
on the yoga mat
Terror
in the living
knifed
room,
through her.
desperate to
A
clear
week
her head.
trapped in a hotel
She bent
room
into
with her
her
husband
pose
and
and
her
felt
lover,
self-conscious
no walls
when
to
she
hide
noticed
behind.
Ethan standing
She claimed
behind her.
food poisoning.
"You're flexible,"
dramatically
he
clutching her
said,
stomach
voice
until
husky.
Mark relented.
Heat flooded her
Annoyed
cheeks.
but convinced.
Instead of
Ethan
telling him
stayed
to
home
leave,
to take care
she
of her,
laughed awkwardly
smiling
and
like a
pretended
wolf
his
located
attention was
only
harmless.
by the slow torment
He
he was
sat
planning.
cross-legged in front
The
of her,
first day Mark
eyes
was
fixed,
gone,
asking
Claire
questions
barricaded
not
herself
about her
in the
chores,
guest room,
but her.
Ethan knocked
What were her
gently every
dreams?
few hours.
Did she ever
asking
feel
if she
lonely
needed
in
anything.
this big house?
She said no.
No one ever
voice
asked
brittle.
Claire that.
By dinner,
Without
isolation
meaning to,
felt
she
worse
admitted
than
she
danger.
sometimes felt
She
like
ventured to the
expensive
kitchen,
furniture,
finding
polished,
Ethan waiting
admired,
with homemade
unused.
soup.
She
His jaw
tried to thank him
tightened.
stiffly,
"You
but he
deserve
brushed
someone
his
who
thumb
actually
across her
touches
lower
you,"
lip.
he murmured.
"You're going to
Fingers
make yourself
grazing
sick
her ankle.
worrying," he said,
Every instinct
feeding her
screamed
screamfuls
to
like
stand
she
up
was
and walk
fragile.
away.
But
Claire
she remained
swallowed,
frozen,
telling
letting
herself
the
she
thrill
could
race
endure
up her spine.
kindness without
That
surrender.
night it rained
But
hard.
after a second glass
Thunder
of wine,
rattled the windows,
her resistance
and the
slipped.
power flickered.
Ethan led
plunging
her to
the
the
house
couch,
into darkness,
fingertips brushing
Claire
her
fumbled
knee in
for
languid
matches
circles.
when Ethan appeared with
He
candles,
kissed her neck while
his
she
presence
trembled
steady
beneath
and
his
calm.
touch.
He
Again
helped her
whispering
light
that
them,
she belonged
the
to him
soft
now.
glow painting
She
his
muttered
face
a weak
in golden
protest,
shadows.
but her
She
body
wrapped
betrayed
herself
her,
in a
leaning
blanket
back
as he took control.
Ethan draped one of
This
his
time when
hoodies
he
over
took
her
shoulders
there was no
without
timid
asking.
hesitation,
Their
only
eyes
heat.
met over
As
the
clothes were
flickering
discarded,
light, and Claire
Claire
gave in
whispered,
to every pulse
"This
of
is
desire
dangerous."
she had denied.
Ethan
They
leaned
spent
closer.
2 fevered
"Only
days
if
like
you
that,
run,"
tangled in
breathed,
bedsheets,
his hand
wandering the
brushed her
house in
cheek,
various stages
tracing
of
lightly
undress,
down to her
barely
lips.
bothering to hide.
She didn't move.
Claire knew it
heart
was
hammering
dangerous,
so loud
but
she
she
could
felt
barely
strangely
think.
invincible.
The
As
ringtone
if
Mark's
shattered the
absence
moment
had
Mark
suspended
calling.
real life.
She stepped
It
aside,
wasn't until his
answering
early
with a
text,
shaky
heading
voice.
home sooner than
Mark
expected,
chatted
that
absently
reality
about
came
meetings
crashing
and
back.
hotel rooms.
Panic-fueled
Claire lied
adrenaline
that everything
surged.
at home was
Claire
fine
and
while
Ethan
Ethan
raced
watched
to
her
erase every
intently
trace.
from across the room.
Washing linens,
She hung up
scrubbing
quickly,
surfaces,
pulse
tucking
racing.
tremors behind
She should
tight
have sent
smiles.
Ethan to bed.
By the time Mark stepped
Instead,
through the door,
she walked back
Claire's
toward
hair
him.
was tied neatly.
He gently
her
pulled
pearl
her down
back
beside
in
him
place,
on the couch.
casserole warming
Rain
in the oven.
lashed the windows.
She hugged him stiffly,
Candlelight
praying he
trembled
couldn't
between
detect
them.
sin in her
Ethan
scent.
looked her over
He seemed
slowly,
oddly tender,
possessively,
kissing her
"I
crown
think
as
about
he
you
set down his
constantly,"
suitcase.
he confessed.
Claire almost
Claire
relaxed
swallowed hard,
until she
lips
noticed the
parted,
unfamiliar
unable
shimmer
to
on his
deny the
collar,
flood of emotions.
faint glitter.
She whispered,
"Someone else's
I'm your
perfume."
stepmother.
Dinner was a
Ethan didn't
silent
blink.
war zone.
"I don't
Mark
care."
spoke cheerfully,
His thumb brushed her
unaware of
lower
the
lip.
tension smothering
She
the
closed
air.
her eyes
Ethan
as tension
sat
wrapped
beside
around
Claire,
them like a
his
rope.
foot brushing hers
She didn't
under
kiss
the
him
table.
back, not
She
yet.
forced herself
But
not
she
to
didn't
flinch.
pull away either.
Mark toasted
not
to family
once.
and fresh beginnings, lifting his wineglass. Claire clinked hers against his, barely breathing. Ethan's hand slid boldly onto her thigh, squeezing possessively. Claire's heart pounded as she stared at her husband over the rim of her glass. In that moment, she realized she was no longer choosing between loyalty and desire. She was trapped between 2 men, one oblivious and one obsessed. And the most dangerous part of all was how much she loved that power. As Mark praised their perfect life, Claire smiled sweetly, swallowing the lie whole while Ethan whispered against her ear, "This is only the beginning."